So I've decided to do a video on effective communication, especially when you're communicating with people online. Because what I've found is the world is a bit of a different place nowadays, and it's sort of very difficult to communicate with people. It's getting more and more difficult. People become very tribal. People sort of, rather than discussing issues, they sort of attack you. And it's gotten to the point where if you have a kind of like a civil conversation online with someone, you'll almost go, oh, thank you for this. It's nice to have a civil conversation for a change. It's almost like a rare experience, which wasn't always the case. When I was growing up, when I was younger, the world was an open forum of different ideas, and you could just express different ideas. And on the odd occasion, you would get into a heated thing where it would get out of control. But it's the opposite now. It's almost like usually it's out of control. Usually people are flinging insults at each other and being mean, and it's rare to have a normal discussion. And here's the thing: when you're discussing something, let's say you're talking about politics, or you're talking about religion, or some sort of ideology. When you're talking in a disagreement with someone, you want to understand each other. You want to try and get somewhere with the conversation, even if you don't agree with each other. You want to get somewhere with the conversation. If you start just attacking each other and calling each other dickhead and all this kind of stuff, then you've got another problem now. Forget about the two problems that you're trying to discuss. You've now got a new problem, and that's you can't even talk anymore. You can't even communicate. All you're doing is fighting. It's almost like whatever ideas you were discussing don't matter anymore, because now you're just fighting with someone, and you get nowhere. It's just pointless, and it creates a world of disharmony where it's just getting ridiculous. So it'd be nice to see a bit more harmony, a bit more civil sort of conversations. Even if you disagree with someone, it's okay to disagree with someone. In fact, you'll probably find that everyone on the planet disagrees with something. So everyone's got their own version of the world, and everyone disagrees with everyone. So no two people think the same thing. So it's pretty much impossible to find someone that's going to believe everything you believe 100%. So it makes no sense to just fight everyone on everything that you have, every difference they have. So I've got 7 points of effective communication, and I'm going to go over the 7 points. I've tried to make it easy. So it's 7 points of effective communication. So let's begin. So the first point is to prioritize communication. So make it a priority that you want to have good communication. You want to go for a win-win situation. And you want to prioritize it on a daily basis. You want to go into discussions thinking that putting communication first, and then during conversations, you keep it a priority. So always keep it a priority, and it's your job to ensure that you keep your cool and stay on track and have a good conversation. So that's your job. And if you can do that, you'll probably find that you'll have, if at least one of you is focused on having a good conversation, you'll be able to get somewhere. So always prioritize good communication, a win-win sort of scenario. Number 2 is don't get upset. So, I mean, if you get upset, it's hard not to get upset, because when you're talking about issues that you're passionate about, it's hard sometimes to not get upset. But the problem is, if you get upset, it's all over. You start insulting the other person, you start making stuff up, like just getting desperate and making stuff up, and you don't get anywhere. So you've got to make sure you don't get upset. If you find yourself getting upset, take a breather, step back, just relax. And if the other person's getting upset, try and de-escalate them, or step away. There's no point engaging with another person that's like raging, because you're not going to get anywhere. There's no point to engage in it with another person who's just like hurling insults at you, and it's a fight. It's not a discussion. I just wanted to also mention one thing very briefly about epistemology. Now, I know that to some of you who haven't heard that word before, it probably sounds a bit daunting and a bit big, but it's very, very simple. So epistemology, and you could do a full video on epistemology, but I'm just going to touch on it very briefly here. Epistemology has to do with the philosophy of how we know what we know, and having the right method and right tools to understanding what we know. So if I could give some examples, things like faith, assumption, guesswork, these would be considered poor methods to understanding the world. So faith is a bad method to understanding the world because you could believe anything using faith. Assumption is very bad because assumptions can often be wrong, and in fact they usually are, a lot of the time they are wrong. And guessing, yeah, so guessing and assumptions are poor methods of understanding the world. And it's important for you to know how much you know about something. Have you researched it really well? How much do you know on it? You've got to be honest with yourself. How much do you know about it? And then and try not to use assumptions. Try not to use guesswork. And if you're talking to someone else and you are guessing, let them know. Say, look, I don't know fully about this, but from what I understand, it's this and this. So you can just let them know that you don't know, but from what you understand, you just assume it's this. It makes it a lot easier rather than going, no, I know this is a fact, when you don't actually know. And that's not a good method anyway. Even if you know something very well, it's not a good method. It's not a good method to go, oh, I know that's a fact. You can go, look, I've read this book and that book, and from what I understand, from what professionals say, it's this. This is what they believe. So it's good to keep it civil anyway. But the reason I brought up epistemology is because it's important to know, for you to understand whether the way you understand the world is effective. Now, the problems with faith, assumption and guesswork is A, it's unreliable, as I just said, but the other thing is anyone can use it as well. So if you're guessing and assuming and using faith, the other person can counteract it just as easily using the same method. So if you assume something, well, the other person can just assume something back and you get nowhere. So let's get to point number 3. So it's don't insult. So don't insult the other person. There's no point. If you're insulting the other person, it shows that you have poor communication skills. It shows that you're losing control. All you're going to do is have them on the defensive, and you're no longer dealing with the situation. You're just yelling at each other and dropping insults. You're not having it. You're not getting anywhere. Nobody is benefiting. So don't insult the other person. Number 5 is what was it? Number 3. Number 4, I should say. Number 4 is to do one point at a time. So this is used in debating. It's a good trick. That's an old debating trick. Is deal with one point at a time. So present one point at a time. Discuss one point at a time. If you want to present something, talk about one thing. If they throw lots of things at you, pick one of those things and pick something that you know a lot about. So maybe they throw 5 different ideas at you. Pick one thing and deal with that one thing. Now, sometimes people will give you a lot of things out of desperation. Like if then they're losing confidence, they'll go, if you go, why do you believe that? They might go, oh, because of this and this, and oh, and also this, and also that. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to throw a smoke bomb, so that you go, oh no, there's too many things. But all you have to do is just pick one of those things and deal with that one thing and keep them on that one thing. Don't let them discuss anything else. They might say to you, but wait, I said this as well, I said that. Just go, look, I'm happy to talk about that, but we have to deal with this one thing first. Let's just stick to one thing. There's no point trying to talk about multiple things. Let's just stick to this one thing. So just go one point at a time, present one point at a time, and if they present multiple points, pick one of those points. Number 5, say, very, very important, say, I don't know. I don't know. I always say, I don't know. It's so valuable. If you don't know something, and you have to be honest with yourself, it's not only is it, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know, everything right with saying I don't know. You give yourself credit. If you don't know something and you say I don't know anything about this, you give yourself credibility. You have more credibility. If you just try and pull things out of midair that you don't know about, you just make all these assumptions and desperately try and just pull things out of your ass, you lose credibility. You just look like, if people can't believe, if people see you just pulling things out of midair, they're not going to take anything you say seriously. So if you don't know something, be honest with yourself. Try and really do some internal reflection. Do I know about this? No, I don't. Say I don't know. It's the best thing you can do. Number 6 is understand the other person. So spend some energy, invest energy trying to understand what they're saying. Don't just dismiss everything they say. So if they might say something that you don't agree with, but don't just dismiss them. Listen carefully to what they're saying, and try and also understand why they're saying it, where they're coming from. It might be hard sometimes, but just spend some time trying to understand where they're coming from. This is actually very important, because sometimes when you're trying to understand what the other person's saying and where they're coming from, you can make discoveries and realize that you're wrong. There's been many times where I'm listening to someone that I didn't agree with, and when I sort of took the time to try and understand what they were saying and why they were saying it, I realized I was wrong. And is that not the whole point of communication, is to make sure that what you understand of the world is accurate? So there's nothing better than being corrected and realizing, actually, they're right, I'm wrong. So and you want to hear what they're saying anyway. There's no point. You've got to spend time understanding what the other person's saying. Number 7, don't say there's research as a response. Don't just say, oh, there's research, do your research. I mean, look, you can sort of say that. Let's just say you're arguing with a creationist, and they're like a religious creationist. And they're attacking science, and they say things like, they talk about the Big Bang, and they say, well, everything can't come from nothing. You guys in science think there's nothing, and then nothing exploded, and then there was everything. So they might say something like that. Or they'll say, when they're talking about evolution, they might say, well, a fish can't give birth to a duck. A fish can only give birth to a fish. A fish can't give birth to a non-fish. So evolution can't be real. No science ever says either of those things. There's no science that ever says there was nothing and now there's everything. There was no science that ever says that an animal gives birth to a different animal. It's never been part of science. That's called a straw man. So they're just bringing up things that aren't in science to try and argue with it. And so in that situation, you can say, look, that's not actually part of science. Like, potentially you want to understand science. Like, go research a little bit more about evolution, or research a little bit more about the Big Bang or whatever. So just so you can understand a little bit more, because at the moment you're arguing a point that no one else is making. So you can sort of say in that circumstance, go research it. But don't just say, there's research, go do your research. You don't know what you're talking about, go do your research. Because so many times I've had conversations and another person, all they're saying is, go do your research. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't get anywhere by saying that. Don't just say there's research. It just sounds like you don't know anything. When you say you don't know what you're talking about, go do your research, it just sounds like you don't know anything. So to go over those points again for effective communication, number 1 was prioritize good communication and go for a win-win situation. Number 2, don't get upset. Number 3, don't insult the other person. Number 4, deal with one point at a time. So present one point at a time. And if you are confronted with multiple points, just pick one of those points. Number 5, say I don't know when you don't know. Number 6, understand the other person. Take your time to understand what they're saying and try and understand why they're saying it. Even if you don't agree with them, it's important to understand what they're saying and why they're saying it. And number 7, don't just say, oh, there's research. So hopefully that helps you, and hopefully you utilize some of these tips, because, it would be nice to see, we can all disagree with each other. It's good to disagree with each other. Everyone will always disagree with each other. But it would be good to see us sort of having more productive conversations so that we can communicate with each other better and make the world a more harmonious place. So thank you for your time.